Hello, YouTubers. I'm Irene. I'm 18, and not very long ago, I had a boyfriend, Charlie. I also had one problem. Charlie continued to keep in touch with his former girlfriend, and he didn't hide it from me. And then there was an explosion. I mean, for real. Well, now I have neither a boyfriend nor a problem, and I don't know who is to blame. I'm hoping you can tell me that. So, Charlie and I had been a couple for about 6 months, and everything was just perfect with us. He was cute and treated me very nicely, and I really liked him. But every weekday, I went crazy because after classes, Charlie went to the school lab to work on an extremely long and very time-consuming chemistry project. You might ask, what was wrong with that? It was a project that he began to work on with his former girlfriend, Liz. Well, at the time when she was still his girlfriend. And then they broke up and stopped being a couple, but they still continued to work on their project together. Please tell me, is this normal? Because I personally don't think so. Every time he went to the lab, Charlie assured me that there was nothing going on between Liz and him. Nothing personal, just business. But I still could not understand why he could not join someone else's project or start a new one. Didn't he understand how I felt about this? Almost every day I was losing my temper, and from time to time, I even started a fight. Finally, when I could not stand it anymore, I told him that I wanted to accompany him to the lab so that I could see with my own eyes what they were actually doing in there. Charlie was furious, but I was, to put it mildly, persistent. So, the next time, we went to the laboratory together. Honestly, when we arrived, I felt stupid. How did I imagine all this playing out? Were these two going to just rush to kiss and hug while I furiously pulled them away from each other? So stupid. But now there was no way out for me. So, after Charlie gloomily introduced Liz and I to each other, I pulled out my ebook and defiantly sat in the corner where I could see them the whole time. Well, there was nothing to look at. They really were working on some chemical nonsense, barely exchanging a couple of words per hour. It was so boring that I could hardly keep my eyes open. I tried to concentrate on my reading, then I tried to count some flasks in a laboratory cabinet, but I still ended up dozing off. Boom! Yes, it was an explosion that woke me up. Well, maybe it wasn't as big of a bada boom as I heard through my nap, but it was still a very loud clap. I saw the fire and Liz, who rushed to Charlie with a fire extinguisher in her hands. As I later found out, she asked him to drain some reagents into the sink, and something went wrong. I have never taken any chemistry classes, so I have a very vague idea what exactly happened and why. But one thing was clear to me. Liz was to blame. She forgot to warn Charlie that these reagents had to be drained in some special way. After a brief panic, someone came in. We called 911, and soon an ambulance arrived, taking Charlie to the hospital. And we both went with him. Liz was very upset by what happened. She blamed herself and felt sorry for Charlie. But you know what? We sat in the waiting room talking, and I suddenly realized that all my jealousy was completely in vain. Liz, of course, was worried about Charlie, but it was very clear she was not in love with him. And one more thing suddenly became clear to me. Oh, Liz was so cool and cute. While Charlie was in the hospital, Liz and I visited him almost every day. I, because I was his girlfriend, and she, because they were working on that project together when Charlie got burnt, and it was her fault. But after a while, I realized that every time I was going to the hospital to meet with Liz and to spend time with her on my way back. Do you understand me? It was like I still loved Charlie, but deep down, I wanted him to stay in the hospital for as long as possible so that I could see Liz every day. I tried to hide my absurd feelings for Liz, but it seemed that she did not feel any discomfort. She willingly talked to me. She often hugged me, put her arms around my shoulders, and was in no hurry to let me go. One day when we were together with Charlie in the hospital room, she suggested that I come to the lab to help her with the project while Charlie was recovering. Charlie had nothing against it. He was even happy. Nothing personal, just business. By the time Charlie left the hospital, I was already so absorbed in my friendship with Liz that my boyfriend had moved somewhere far to the background of my consciousness. He was still very depressed by what had happened to him, and he either didn't notice that there was something wrong with me, or he simply didn't want to sort things out with me. But once, when I promised to come to his place for a romantic evening with Chinese food and some movie that he wanted me to watch, I was so carried away by chatting with Liz on social networks that I just forgot about our arrangements and didn't show up. Then Charlie called me and sadly admitted that apparently something has become broken between us and that we needed to take a break. To be honest, I was so relieved. But then another problem arose. Charlie returned to his school chemistry project, and my jealousy returned to me. But this time I was losing my mind, not because of Charlie, but because of Liz. During these several weeks that I had spent in the lab helping Liz, I'd gotten used to thinking about this project as our project, even if I was really bad at chemistry and only kept Liz company while she worked. And now I hated to see them together so much when they were leaning almost cheek to cheek above their flasks that I could not hide my irritation. I said something nasty to Charlie once, then another time, and finally, one day he could not stand it and reminded me, telling me that I came here to help him, but he no longer needed my help. In short, he said I should just stay away from the lab. I did not expect anything like that at all, and I was very upset. But when I later talked with Liz on the phone, she assured me that all of this didn't mean anything and that we could meet in any other place, anytime, just the two of us. She was so sweet that I suddenly felt an urge to open my heart to her. I said that I loved her, and not just as a friend. And I could not have anticipated Liz's reaction. Very softly and gently, she told me that she had understood everything a long time ago and that we needed to meet and think about what we could do about it. I could not believe that I could be so lucky. I was so happy. And then she said that we should also think about how to explain everything to Charlie. When she mentioned him, I got angry, and I said that it was none of his business and that he could do whatever he wanted, but I had never even thought of going back to him. Then Liz and I agreed that she would text me later, telling me where we could meet to discuss everything, and she wished me good night. She called me her lovely girl, and I was so happy and inspired that I could not sleep all night. The next day was Sunday. I woke up in the afternoon, and a message from Liz was already waiting for me. She told me where we should meet. I knew this place. It was a cozy, romantic coffee house. Now, I was sure Liz also felt something for me. I had dated several guys before Charlie and never even thought that I might have a girlfriend. It was so exciting. I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes ahead of time, but Liz was already there and she waved to me. But when I approached, I saw that she was not alone. Charlie was sitting across from her, and oh my gosh, he was holding her hand that was lying on the table. I literally froze. I could not understand what was going on, and Liz continued to smile at me very sweetly. Smiling just as sweetly, she said to Charlie, "Now, let go of my arm." Something strange was in her voice, and I saw that Charlie now also understood nothing. And Liz said that now that we had finally gotten together in this wonderful place, we should talk. Or rather, she would give us something to listen to. She took out her smartphone and first turned on the recording of my conversation with her, where I said that I loved her and talked badly about Charlie. And then she turned on the recording of her conversation with Charlie, where he asked Liz to come back to him and said that he regretted leaving her for that psychopath Irene. That was me. And after that, Liz just got up and left. I don't know why she was so sure that her complicated revenge would work and that Charlie and I wouldn't want to see each other again. Perhaps, in addition to chemistry, she was also fond of psychology. But she calculated everything absolutely right. After everything that happened, Charlie and I literally couldn't stand to see each other. Even trying would be pointless. Maybe if Liz just told us about what each of us told her, everything could somehow have gotten better. But not after we heard this with our own ears. We left that coffee shop in different directions without even saying goodbye to each other. And I still can't completely get over this story. I keep thinking about it again and again and still can't figure out who was guilty in it. Was I to blame because in fact I had betrayed my boyfriend? Or was it Charlie because he needed to stop talking to his former girlfriend after they broke up, no matter how important their project was to him? Or was Liz the only one who should have been blamed? Let's not forget, she made sure that Charlie, who had once